Welcome back to Law and Crime, everybody. Okay, we had an update yesterday that we have to talk about right now. You might remember that former National Security Advisor Michael Flynn had pled guilty to lying to the FBI regarding his contact with a Russian official. And you'll also recall that he admitted to lying about his lobbying efforts in Turkey. Well, yesterday we saw that Special Counsel Robert Mueller's office issued their sentencing memo in which they stated Flynn has provided substantial assistance on several investigations, and they recommend no prison time. Let's talk a little bit more about this. And joining us is a great guest, a very special guest here on Law and Crime, national security expert Bradley Moss is with us. Bradley, it's great to have you here on Law and Crime.
Happy to assist. Good morning.
Good morning. Let's start right off by what this other investigations may be. Now, I know a lot of the memo was redacted, so I'm curious your thoughts about what this means.
Sure. So what we could tell just from the framing of the memo was that at least one component of what was completely redacted pertains to the special counsel's investigation, whether that goes into this issue of collusion and criminal conspiracy, which was the original premise for this investigation, or if it's one of the additional components that the Justice Department has allowed Special Counsel Mueller to investigate. That's one element of what General Flynn has provided, and that has been helpful to the special counsel. The separate issue is that there's an entire another section in there that just refers to criminal investigation. And all they note is that it's separate from whatever the special counsel is doing. Is this referring to something in the Southern District of New York, the campaign finance issues that has implicated the president's former personal attorney, Michael Cohen? We don't know yet. But certainly there's something else that's been handed off to another DOJ component, but that was derived from information provided by General Flynn during his during this investigation, during his cooperation with the special counsel.
The idea that he was so forthcoming to help, we got that sense from the memo that he was so forthcoming to provide assistance. What does that tell you?
Well, it tells us that General Flynn was, more than anything else, trying to save himself and trying to save his own career and his own freedom. Look, yeah, the memo outlines how he came forward. He was very cooperative. He gave valuable assistance. That's very different from what we've heard from other individuals tied up in this probe. Think George Papadopoulos. Think Paul Manafort, both who've locked heads with the special counsel. Now George Papadopoulos is sitting in jail, and Paul Manafort's about to get ready to get sentenced, probably spend the rest of his natural life in jail. What we saw with General Flynn, he had something, he knew how to trade it. This is what you see in any kind of criminal investigation, whether it's national security related or just standard white-collar crime or drug cases. The person who comes forward first and provides the valuable info and is cooperative gets the better deal. And that's what you're seeing here as a special counsel is saying, we recommend no jail time, despite everything that went on, despite the lies, despite the failure to register as a foreign agent, despite serving as national security advisor while being an unregistered foreign agent. The special counsel's recommendation for General Flynn is 0 jail time.
Yeah, and here's the thing, right? In any kind of investigation, whenever you hear that somebody's providing information, like you said, the first thing you think is, what are they getting in return? Here, if it was at no prison time, you're seeing what he would get in return. The question is, of course, is he credible? Is he believable? And we all know that you can't just take any witness's testimony for what it is. You have to back it up with other kinds of evidence. The fact that they said he provided substantial assistance and they recommend no prison time, does that tell you that whatever he told them is probably true, that they've backed it up by other sources?
That's certainly what I read into it, that whatever he provided, whether it was verbal testimony in these 19 separate sessions he had with DOJ, whether it was a special counsel in particular or other DOJ components, as well as any documents, emails, memoranda, video recording, audio recording, whatever he turned over, that was corroborating and substantiating other information that the special counsel already had, whether it was from other witnesses or from other documents. And yeah, you're right. You wouldn't just take, the word of Michael Flynn at this point to be evidence unto itself, but if it substantiates, if it corroborates other information you've got, that's good and valuable assistance, and you'll credit him for doing that.
Because ironically, the thing that he pled guilty to was lying. So, I mean, you have to take that for what it is. Now, here's the interesting part about this. Do you think that the level of redaction, and when we read this memo, is there something that you can get a sense of what other kinds of investigations? I know it's very tough, but the way that certain things were phrased and that the public was able to get some information but not others, is Robert Mueller trying to tell us something?
I think he's trying to say that, despite all the hype you might see in the media and people from the president's legal team trying to talk about how this is wrapping up any day now, they're not done yet. Is it reaching its end? Most likely. I would certainly assume in 2019 this will reach an end. But all the commentary, all the rumor and speculation that Mueller's just about done and he's just tying up loose ends, no, he's got at least one other separate investigative probe that is so sensitive still, he won't disclose any details of it, at least for purposes of last night. Maybe he'll do so on Friday with the Manafort filing, but that there's additional investigative inquiries going on. They're preparing potentially additional indictments, and we don't know for sure what they're pertaining to. This, everybody has to talk about how this investigation is, all these leaks. That's great, but none of it seems to come from the Mueller team. Every time they make a filing, every time they issue one of those speaking indictments, as they're called, we learn more information and we learn how much Robert Mueller knows that we know nothing about.
So don't expect his report anytime soon, especially since what happened with Michael Cohen. He's still building a case.
Correct. I wouldn't expect to see at least the final collusion report anytime soon, maybe in the summer of 2019 at the earliest. It's possible the obstruction angle, they might be able to finalize, concluding that anything else that would happen at this point, any other efforts the president would take to try to, quote unquote, interfere would be de minimis, that anything that was relevant, that was material to an obstruction angle for the House and Senate to consider has already been done, and he can write that report sometime soon. But when it comes to the original premise, the collusion, criminal conspiracy, that stuff, I don't think Mueller is quite done yet.
But recommending no prison time, have you seen that before? Is that unusual?
It depends always on the circumstances. And I think what we saw here was, look, there was a lot to credit for Michael Flynn from his background. He was extensive public service, longtime military official, provided a lot to this country from a national security standpoint. And that was a bit of a double-edged sword. So it was a credit to him in terms of reducing it, but it was also why there was a charge brought in the first place. And this is what the Mueller team mentioned in their filing, more was expected of him given his seniority. So, look, he got the credit. He certainly apparently ratted out everything, spilled everything, told whatever the special counsel needed, was very cooperative and substantiated other information. That's why he's getting the good recommendation. And this should be a model for other individuals tied up in this probe who are still debating whether or not to cooperate, that if you play ball, you can save yourself.
Maybe, right? They might not all get the same treatment. Now, here's the thing. Just because that's a recommendation doesn't mean that he's not going to see prison time, right?
Correct. It's certainly possible that the judge would still impose some amount of prison time, especially depending on, when you have that final hearing, go before the judge, and they'll assess the credibility and the authenticity of how Michael Flynn comments and his remorse and apologies. That goes with any kind of criminal proceeding, whether or not they view this as just a lot of lawyer talk or if General Flynn truly is apologetic for what transpired. I would assume, given what we've seen in other parts of this investigation with the Papadopoulos getting 14 days, the one lawyer getting 30 days, I would be surprised if General Flynn got much of any jail time at this point, giving the recommendation from Mueller's team, maybe 2 weeks at most. But if he got 0, it wouldn't shock me in the slightest.
Interesting. And look, we do not know what information he provided and what information he provided in relation to President Trump. But if you're President Trump and you're his legal team, you can't ignore what happened. So what do you think they're doing right now in relation to this sentencing memo?
Well, if this was a normal legal team and a normal criminal, potentially criminal suspect, they would be reviewing everything, going over details of every email that they have in their files, going back over with their client on every single potential discussion that that individual had with someone like General Flynn or related parties, and making sure they didn't miss anything, making sure there's not some additional areas of legal exposure that they haven't caught. That's what I would expect from a normal legal team with a normal client. This is Donald Trump. Donald Trump does not play by those rules. So while I would expect that they would be doing some due diligence, the lawyers behind the scenes right now trying to double check everything, I don't know if they'll be able to pull off everything they would normally want to do, because I don't know if Donald Trump will be willing to sit through those type of invasive preparatory sessions with his lawyers to double check everything, because that's really where his exposure is if he has been concealing information from his own lawyers and he's in far more trouble than they realize. That's where he could have trouble down the line.
Final question. I know we don't have a lot of time, but I got to ask you, do you think any information he provided has anything to do with the Trump Tower meeting and Donald Jr.'s involvement?
Michael Flynn is probably the one person I don't think that would have anything to do with, unless there was some separate sessions, separate discussions, either in the immediate circumstances when they first were setting up the meeting, and maybe they're doing some preparatory sessions. There's been some reporting that there was a pre-meeting amongst some of the Trump team members to discuss it. Maybe there was a debrief afterwards. I don't know, but Michael Flynn's the one person I haven't really heard much reported in that context.
Well, we're going to have to wait and see. National security expert Bradley Moss, thank you so much for coming here on Law and Crime.
Absolutely. Have a good morning.
You too. All right, everybody, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we'll talk more about the police cover-up trial. Stay tuned.